Ladies and gentlemen, 10 or 15 years ago, at the time of the Lisbon Treaty, there was hope that the process of European unification would receive a new boost and that this would put our continent in a very good position in the world as a whole, technologically and in terms of the economy and even politically. And obviously that will be done with respect for the states and for the peoples of Europe as a whole. It seemed reasonable to think 10, 12, 14 years ago that in general the progress of globalization would be compatible with the existence of all sorts of different identities, political, cultural, linguistic, religious, and obviously for the politics connected with these identities. I was at that time I was president of Catalonia, that is a small country with a good development, that is true, but without statehood, and with a promising shared project for the future, economic project, social project, cultural project, and so on. All that within Spain and Europe that had, it seemed, a rosy outlook. That period, around about the year 2000, was for me, for instance, a time of enthusiasm and hope. Since then, things have changed. Identity issues have been more sharp, taken off all over Europe, and also in the United States. Distances have shrunk, and the world has become smaller. Time is running faster. The massive immigration which is taking place in many European countries, and its religious, cultural, and political characteristics, has provoked reactions in many countries, in many European countries, but also in the United States. Also in the United States, the question of who we are, this question, he was not useful 50 or 60 or 100 years ago, has become far more of an issue than used to be the case. And the massive and highly necessary development of information technology has also radically changed relationships, not only between individuals, but also between groups of people with a gamut of different cultural, religious, social, or ideological outlooks. What is going in North Africa and the Middle East is in part a consequence of these changes. They are a proof of what I said earlier. The world has shrunk and time is running faster. And at the moment there is no answer, and not a broadly based world or regional governance, not a universal answer of governance, neither in the United Nations nor in the European Union. As a citizen of Europe and as a pro-European, my attention is centered on a situation that was unforeseen 10 or 12 years ago. That is, at the time when the adoption of the euro as single European currency led us to look forward to the economic and political future of Europe with confidence and to expect a long period of harmonious growth. But in fact, 10 or 12 years later, we are at a critical juncture. We are living a period of uncertainty and of embarrassment, fairly widespread throughout the world, but very evident in Europe, this mood. We believed that economic and social progress and the gradual integration of the European economies would produce a good global outcome, that Europe as a whole would be strengthened and that the development of its member countries would be invigorated. This is not quite what has happened. Overall, European economic, social, and political progress requires a level playing field with rules that are respected by everyone, general rules. There must also be some common values and solidarity between the members. Genuine, generous solidarity, genuine solidarity. Genuine solidarity. And that does not, however, open the door to abuse or to deceit. Everyone is obliged to respect the rules. This has gone wrong in Europe, and it has led to critical situations for the European Union as a whole, and specifically in a very worrying way for certain countries that have lost or could lose completely or in a large measure their ability to have a domestic policy of their own. I will give you an example of this. It is the case of Spain. Spain, the Spanish government, in fact, is not ruling the country from the economic point of view since May of 2010. It has avoided the intervention of the European Union and that of the International Monetary Fund, but it follows their instructions very strictly, or so strictly as possible, because sometimes Spain, the government, has some internal difficulties. With regard to economic policy, and to some extent to social policy, the Spanish government has not been in charge since May of last year. And that has not been a bad thing. In fact, the evolution of Spain continues suffering a very deep crisis, but in fact, and that will last several years probably, but in fact, the economic measures that are taken today obviously are more in the good direction as they were before. Now, under the direction of Brussels, of Frankfurt, of Berlin, and of Washington. It could be the case, in fact, that is already happening in Spain and in other countries, that one of the effects of the economic downturn is a leap forward in the process of European unification. This would be a case in which an aspect of globalization, the aspect of the European unification, leads to a restriction in the room of maneuvers for domestic policies. From my point of view, as a convinced pro-European, this would be a good thing, with one condition. With the condition that this process of unification of the economic policies and to a certain extent of social policies, they must respect the identities of the various European countries, the respect of their own way of life of each country. There is too much history in Europe, amongst other things, too much Middle Ages, to suppose that the member states and the different nations, cultures and ways of thinking, of which they are comprised, can be subjected to any kind of process which would involve a loss of personality. Helmut Schmidt said years ago that Europe would never become a state, that it would never become a United States of Europe, but that it would be, and that it would have to be, much more than an alliance between states. It is this intermediate position that must also make possible the European version of balance between globalization and domestic policies, within politics of general European interest, that is to say, of interest to all of us, and Europe's ethical, ideological, social, and cultural strength. All this is now in crisis, and to a certain extent, even threatened on account of external pressures and internal European weaknesses. But Europe's assets are of such way that we can overcome these difficulties if we reflect deeply and consider the risk of the present moment and recover our values. Our values must be strong. They must not be liquid, as some people say. It must be solid, strong values. Without values, Europe will not, with their own values, Europe will now go ahead. And so we will go ahead. And also we will maintain positive attitudes of self-respect, and we are resolute and self-demanding. Thank you for your attention.